Picture a woman who has not bathed in 6 weeks. Now dress her in 4 layers of clothing, lace her into a corset so tight she cannot draw a full breath, pin her hair into an elaborate structure that took 40 minutes to build and cannot be disturbed under any circumstances, and send her into a ballroom full of 500 other people who have also not bathed in 6 weeks. Add candlelight that makes everything look gilded and forgiving. Add hothouse orchids wilting in crystal vases. Add a string quartet playing Strauss waltzes with the desperate cheerfulness of men who are also, incidentally, not entirely clean. Add gloves, always the gloves, white and immaculate and reaching past the elbow, because the wrists must never be seen, and neither must the smell of the hands inside them. That's Victorian England, a civilization that built the greatest empire in the history of the world, and simultaneously believed that bathing your entire body at once was medically dangerous. A society that produced Dickens and Darwin, and the Great Exhibition, and the Crystal Palace, and also genuinely, sincerely, with the full backing of qualified medical opinion, thought that getting water on your skin too often would open your pores to disease and rot your constitution from the outside in. A world where the richest women in the country owned more dresses than some small nations have citizens. Where the hem of a skirt could cost more than a factory worker earned in a year. Where a lady's hair was her crowning glory, her crowning obsession, her crowning architectural project. And where that same lady, in all her magnificence, in all her silk and jet and ivory and kid leather, might step closer to you in a drawing room and smell, beneath the violet water and the pomade and the dried lavender tucked into her bodice, of herself, of her actual unwashed body, of a human being who has been very, very busy not bathing. I make these history stories, and honestly, I have absolutely no idea if you're listening because you're genuinely interested in the social and medical history of Victorian cleanliness, or because it's 2 a.m. and you needed something to fill the dark, and a story about women who smelled like unwashed silk felt oddly comforting. Either way, here you are. Subscribe if the mood takes you. Get comfortable. Find the position your body has been waiting for all day. Let your shoulders drop. Here we go. Your name is Eleanor. Eleanor Margaret Ashworth. Née Sinclair, 29 years old, wife of a solicitor, resident of a tall narrow house in Islington, North London, in the year of our Lord 1873. You have a drawing room with good furniture and a coal fire. You have 2 servants, a cook who comes in daily, and a housemaid named Agnes who lives in the attic, and whose primary virtue, in your estimation, is that she does not complain too loudly about anything. You have a husband who leaves the house at 8:30 every morning and returns at 7, sometimes 7:30, and who asks very little of you except that the household be managed sensibly, and that supper be on the table when he arrives. You have a daughter, 4 years old, called Beatrice, who is at this moment asleep in the nursery next door. You have a small but serviceable garden. You have a subscription to Moody's lending library. You have a social life that consists of calling on other women, receiving other women, attending church on Sundays, and appearing at dinner parties approximately twice a month. What you do not have, what you have not had in exactly 38 days, is a bath. Not a proper one. Not the kind that involves hot water and a tub large enough to sit in, and the actual, intentional washing of your entire body from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet. You have had other things. You have had a great deal of other things, actually. But a bath? A full immersion bath? No, not for 38 days. And you don't think of this as a problem. That's the thing. That is the thing that is going to be very difficult to explain. and that I am going to spend the next several hours attempting to make you understand from the inside. You don't think of those 38 days as a failure of hygiene or an oversight or a small shameful secret. You think of them as entirely normal, because they are entirely normal. Because in Eleanor Ashworth's world, your world, this is just how things are. This is just what life is. The bath is a significant undertaking, a logistical event that requires planning and servants and a great deal of heated water and about 3 hours of the morning, and you do it when it becomes necessary and not before. When necessary. That's the operative phrase. And necessary means something very different in 1873 than it means now. Your eyes open to the particular grey darkness of a November morning in a city that burns coal for everything, for heat, for industry, for light, for the slow progressive blackening of every surface it touches. The curtains are heavy wool, bottle green, and they don't quite meet in the middle. And through that gap comes a thin blade of light the colour of old pewter. It is approximately 6:30. You know this, not because you have looked at the clock on the mantelpiece. You cannot see the clock, it's too dark. But because you can hear the rhythms of the street beginning to stir below. The sound of iron-shod hooves on wet cobblestones. A cart. The low call of a man's voice saying something you cannot make out. A dog. Somewhere distant. In the middle of a dream about chasing something. Then the smell. And this is the thing. This is the thing you need to understand. This is the thing I need you to feel in your chest before we go any further into this story. The smell is layered. It is not one thing. It is a stratigraphy, like geological rock, each level pressed down on top of the last until you have something dense and complex and entirely specific to this room, this house, this life. There is the coal smoke first, always the coal smoke. It has settled into everything. The curtains, the carpet, the wallpaper, the wood of the furniture, the wool of the blankets. You breathe it in, and it is so familiar it barely registers, the way you stop noticing the sound of a clock once you've lived with it long enough. Coal smoke is the bass note of Victorian London the way salt is the bass note of the sea. You live inside it, you think in it. Your lungs have been processing it for 29 years and will continue to process it until you die. Beneath the coal smoke, the room, a closed room, a room that has been sealed against the November cold, with the windows painted shut in the summer. The gap under the door stuffed with a draught excluder that Agnes made from an old stocking filled with sand. The fireplace damped down for the night, but still breathing a faint ghost of ash and char. A room where 2 people have been sleeping for 8 hours, where the sheets have not been changed in a week. A week is normal, a week is the standard. Changing them more often is extravagant. And Mrs. Beeton, who knows about these things, says once a week is perfectly correct for a household of your means. Where the nightcap you wore to bed, the cotton one that protects your hair and was laundered last Monday, has absorbed the warmth of your head and your hair oil through the night and smells of both. Where the air is stale in the particular way that a closed occupied room gets stale. That warm, humid fug of exhaled breath and skin warmth, and the 100 small biological processes that continue while you sleep. And then, underneath all of it, below the smoke and the room and the sheets, yourself. Not badly, not offensively, not the way you might imagine. This is important. This is one of the things that gets misunderstood when people read about Victorian hygiene from a distance, from the safety of their showers and their hot running water, and there are half-dozen different soaps arranged on the edge of the bath. It's not that Eleanor Ashworth smells foul. She does not smell foul. She smells human. She smells lived in. She smells of the particular mixture of warmth and skin oils and the faint sweetness of hair that has not been washed in 2 weeks, and the ghost of yesterday's violet water that she dabbed at her wrists and throat before going out to call on Mrs. Hartley. She smells the way human beings smell when they've been in the world for a few weeks without immersion, present, particular, real. A smell that would be shocking to you in your bathroom in the future, but that in this room, in this morning, is simply the smell of life. Welcome to Islington in November 1873. You lie still for a moment, because the bed is warm and the room is not, and there is a specific cruelty to the moment when you must go from the one to the other. The blankets are wool, heavy, and they have moulded themselves to the shape of you overnight, and your husband's warmth is a pressure along your left side, steady and reliable as a banked fire. He's still asleep. He breathes through his mouth when he sleeps, a thing you noticed on your wedding night 5 years ago, and have since incorporated into the background music of your existence, the way you have incorporated the coal smoke and the sound of the street. You swing your legs over the edge of the mattress. The floor hits your feet with a cold that travels instantly up through your soles and your ankles and your calves. A cold that is specific to November floorboards, dense and penetrating and absolutely awake. You stand. The chemise you sleep in, fine cotton to the ankle, long sleeves, is no match for the air in this room, which is probably 45 degrees Fahrenheit and feels colder. You move quickly. You always move quickly in this first moment of the day, before the decision not to move can take over. The washstand is in the corner. It is made of mahogany, small and neat, with a marble top, and on it sits a china basin painted with blue flowers and a matching pitcher. Agnes filled that pitcher last night with cold water from the kitchen pump and left it covered with a cloth so it would not collect dust. It has been sitting there all night in a room that is 45 degrees. You know, even before you touch it, exactly how cold that water is. You touch it. It is very cold. This is your morning wash. This is what happens every day. The thing that happens instead of the bath. The thing that makes the bath unnecessary on most mornings. The daily ritual that Victorian women have elevated into something almost ceremonious in its compression and efficiency. You pour water from the pitcher into the basin. A thin stream, not too much, because you will have to tip the used water into the slop bucket, and you don't want too much of it. And you dip the cloth that hangs on the washstand's rail and you wash your face. Cold water and plain soap, a hard cake of it that sits in the soap dish and smells faintly of tallow and lye, with something floral added to make it seem less like something rendered from animal fat, which it mostly is. You wash your face and your neck and the back of your neck. You wash your hands. You attend to what the manuals call the intimate parts, which you do quickly and with the brisk efficiency of someone completing a necessary task, the same way you might wind a clock or trim a lamp wick, correctly, properly, without excessive fuss. Cold water, soap, the rough cloth leaving your skin pink and slightly stung. Your underarms you attend to with particular attention. You have learned this. You have read enough of the household management books and the ladies' magazines, the Englishwoman's domestic magazine, the Queen, the various publications that exist to tell women how to live their lives with maximum propriety and minimum odour, to know that the underarms require specific maintenance even when the rest of you does not. There is a lotion you keep in a small bottle next to the soap dish. It smells of camphor and something else you cannot identify, and the apothecary described it vaguely as for the toilet. You apply it with the corner of the cloth. It stings slightly and then evaporates and leaves behind a chill that persists for several minutes. You do not think of this as inadequate. You do not think of it as a compromise. This is correct. This is proper. Mrs. Beeton says so. The ladies' magazine say so. Your mother said so. You've been doing this every morning since you were old enough to manage your own washing, and it has not yet occurred to you to find it insufficient because insufficiency requires a comparison, and the comparison you need, the shower, the instant hot water, the bar of deodorant soap, does not exist. In its absence, this is simply what clean means. You dry your face on the linen hand towel and look at yourself in the small mirror mounted above the washstand. The mirror is slightly foxed at one corner, a brown shadow creeping in from the edge that has been there since before you moved into this house. Your reflection looks back at you from a grey morning face, your hair loose from the nightcap and pressing in soft coils around your temples. Brown hair, and there is a great deal of it. This is one of the things about you that your husband particularly admires, and also one of the great logistical burdens of your grooming life, because this hair is the reason bathing is so complicated, so time-consuming, so not something you do on an ordinary Tuesday morning without significant planning. Because to wash your hair properly, and you must wash it properly or not at all, requires heat. Requires time, requires that you sit close to a fire for 2-3 hours while it dries, or go about with damp hair wrapped in a cloth, and risk the chill that everyone around you will immediately identify as the precursor to pneumonia, influenza, a wasting fever, and possibly death. The medical literature on this point is not ambiguous. Wet hair in cold air is dangerous. Everyone knows this. Your mother knew it. Agnes knows it. The doctor who attends the household, a thin man named Dr. Pembridge with kind eyes and absolutely firm opinions about the relationship between cold air and illness, would not only confirm it, but would probably add several additional warnings about the state of the London fog at this time of year, and the particular vulnerability of the female constitution to respiratory ailments. So you do not wash your hair today. You will not wash it tomorrow. You washed it 10 days ago, and it was an entire morning's work, and Agnes had to help, and you sat by the fire in your bedroom in a dressing gown until early afternoon, before it was dry enough to do anything with. And then there was the pinning and the arranging and the oil to add back what the washing had stripped out. And by the time you were dressed and presentable, you had lost 6 hours. 6 hours! For a woman managing a household with a 4-year-old and dinner to plan and the books to check and 3 social calls to return, 6 hours for the hair alone is not something you can produce every week. Instead, you brush it. 100 strokes is what the ladies' magazines say, and you do your best on most days, sitting at the dressing table in front of the larger mirror with the proper light from the window, counting the strokes in your head while Agnes, she has come up quietly while you are at the washstand as she does every morning, stands behind you and helps with the sections at the back. The brush is silver-backed, a wedding present from your husband's mother, with boar bristles that are stiff enough to move through the layers of your hair and pull out the dust and the coal smoke that has settled into it overnight. The brushing distributes the natural oils from the scalp through the length of the hair, and this is important. This is the whole point of the 100 strokes, because those oils are what keep the hair glossy and smooth and manageable, and are the reason that Victorian women's hair, when you see it in portraits, has that specific look, that dark, weighted, thoroughly inhabited look that is not quite the look of freshly washed hair, but is something richer. something more present. Your hair smells of itself as Agnes brushes it out, of the oil you applied last week and the pomade she smoothed in at the roots yesterday, of coal smoke that is now so deeply embedded in the fibres that you could wash it 3 times and still catch a ghost of it on a warm day, of something sweeter underneath, the particular sweetness of human hair that has been doing its biological work for a while. It is not an unpleasant smell. It is a full smell. It is the smell of hair that is living and present and being tended to and used and present in the world in a way that clean, freshly washed hair sometimes isn't. But you do not think about the smell. You do not catalogue it. It is simply there, the way everything is simply there, the smell of your own life. Agnes pins it efficiently. You have worn it the same way for 3 years. Drawn up, coiled at the back, 2 curls permitted at the temples. And she can do it now almost without looking, her fingers finding the places where the pins go with the unerring confidence of someone who has learned a particular geography so well it no longer requires maps. She uses 9 pins, sometimes 10. It takes 12 minutes. When she is done, you look in the mirror and the woman looking back at you is the woman you recognize, the woman you've been for the past several years, neat and assembled and ready to be Mrs. Ashworth. Now you dress. This is the part that people from the future find bewildering. The sheer number of garments, the sheer layered architecture of a Victorian woman's dressed body, the many territories between the skin and the surface that the world sees. Let me take you through it, because you live this every morning and it is so normal to you that you barely clock it. But I want you to feel the weight of it, the warmth of it, the improbable and elaborate practicality of it, because this layering is directly related to the question of the bath, to why the bath is rare and the morning wash is sufficient, and the whole structure of Victorian female cleanliness makes a kind of sense, terrible and uncomfortable sense, once you understand how the body moves through it. First, the chemise, cotton, fine, to the knee. This you slept in and will wear today. It is your innermost layer, the garment against your skin. It is this chemise and others like it that bear the brunt of the body's work. The warmth, the oils, the natural secretions of a body going about its life, so that everything above it remains, in theory, uncontaminated. The chemise is washable. It is laundered on Mondays, when Agnes and the woman who comes in to help with the heavy work fill the copper in the kitchen and boil the whites and wring them out in the yard and hang them on the line, weather permitting, or on the rack above the range when it isn't. The chemise gets washed. The chemise takes the dirt. Everything above the chemise is protected by it. Then the stays. Your corset, though you use the word stays because corset has recently acquired certain connotations and stays sounds better in polite conversation. They're made of cotton twill reinforced with whalebone, a dozen strips of it running vertically through the fabric, and they lace up the back, which is why Agnes is here. You turn around. She feeds the laces through the eyelets, starting from the middle and working outward in both directions, and pulls and pulls. Your waist narrows. Your ribs compress. Your posture adjusts itself automatically to the new architecture. Your shoulders going back, your spine straightening, your whole carriage changing. And this is not metaphor. This is not figure of speech. This is physics. The stays redistribute your body into a different shape, and that shape in turn changes how you breathe and stand and move, shallowly and carefully and with a permanent awareness of your own structure. You have worn stays since you were 14 years old. Your ribs have adapted. Your posture is what it is because the stays have made it so over 15 years of daily wear. You feel, without the stays, oddly unmoored, soft, vulnerable. You put them on, and something in your posture settles into its proper alignment, the way a bookshelf full of books all lean toward each other at once, and then someone slides in a bookend and everything stands straight. This is your bookend. This is your architecture. The drawers next. Long cotton drawers open at the crotch. This is both practical and to modern sensibility startling, but it is universal among women of your time and class because the alternative, closed drawers, makes the management of petticoats and chamber pots and the sheer logistics of Victorian undressing significantly more complicated than they already are. The drawers are trimmed at the knee with a small broderie anglaise frill that no one will ever see except you and Agnes, and on occasion your husband. The frill exists because the principle exists that all garments, even the invisible ones, should be correct, should be finished, should be the product of the same care and attention and needlework that would be applied to anything that might be seen. This is what it means to be a lady. The quality of the invisible things, then the petticoat, then the second petticoat, then the cage crinoline. Though in 1873 the pure circular crinoline is giving way to the bustle. Fashion is shifting. The vast spherical skirts of the 60s are contracting into the bustle shape of the 70s. But your household does not replace garments the moment fashion changes, and you still have the crinoline you purchased in 1870, and it still functions perfectly well. The cage sits on your hips, a structure of steel rings graduating in size, and the skirt of your dress will hang from it. It weighs 3 pounds. You feel it every day. The weight of your own shape, the effort of moving a structure of steel and wire and petticoat through rooms and around furniture, the unconscious calculations your body makes about doorways and corners, and whether the particular chair you're about to sit in requires the cage to be tipped slightly or sat on very deliberately. And then the dress. Today's dress is dark blue wool with a white collar and white cuffs, the cuffs detachable. The collar and cuffs can be removed and laundered separately, and this is important. This is crucial. This is one of the great engineering achievements of Victorian clothing maintenance. Because the parts that show, the collar, the cuffs, the white bands of fabric that frame the face and the hands, the parts that people actually look at when they are speaking to you, these can be washed frequently, laundered until they are bright. The body of the dress, the wool skirt and bodice, does not need to be washed, cannot really be washed without risk of damage, and is expected to last the season. The collar and cuffs carry the cleanliness. They absorb the dirt at the edges and get replaced or washed while the dress itself continues. It is a system. It is a rational system, thought through by generations of women managing households on limited resources, and it makes sense if you understand the constraints it was designed for. Agnes does the buttons at the back. There are 14 of them. Small fabric-covered buttons that require a button hook to manage, and she does it with the practiced speed of someone for whom this is an ordinary part of an ordinary morning. The dress closes around you. The weight of it settles onto your shoulders. The wool presses down on the stays which press in on your ribs and the whole assembly of you. Stays and chemise and petticoats and cage and dress and your own body nested in the middle of it all like a letter folded into an envelope, is complete. You look in the mirror. You look, as you always look, exactly right. The smell of the room is still there, the cold smoke and the closed morning and your own particular warmth. But you are dressed now, and dressed means ready. and ready means the house. Let me stop here for a moment, not to lecture you, not to give you a history lesson while you're trying to drift off, but because I need you to understand something about what just happened in that dressing room. What you have just done, this elaborate morning assembly, this layering of linen and bone and wool and cotton, it is not separate from the question of bathing. It is the answer to the question of bathing. The reason Victorian women bathe so infrequently is not because they were ignorant, not because they were slovenly, not because they did not care. It is because the system of clothing they lived inside was designed, among other things, to make bathing less necessary. The chemise takes the sweat. The stays mould the body into a shape that limits physical exertion and therefore limits sweating. The many layers trap body heat and moderate its expression. The collar and cuffs, washable and replaceable, maintain the appearance of freshness at the visible edges. The whole system is, in its own terms, coherent. You're not unclean. You're managed. You're a body that has been very carefully organised so that its natural processes are contained, absorbed, redirected and controlled. But there is a but. There is always a but. You're also, under all of it, a body, with a body's warmth and its needs and the particular chemistry of 38 days of morning washes and careful management and not quite getting all of it. And some days, not every day, not most days, but some days, you are aware of that body in a way that is not entirely comfortable. Today, actually, is one of those days. Agnes notices before you say anything. This is her gift, and you're grateful for it, the way you're grateful for anything that spares you from having to name uncomfortable things out loud. She's been your housemaid for 3 years. She has, in that time, developed a comprehensive understanding of the rhythms of your household and your person, and she stands now after the buttons and looks at you in the mirror with an expression that is entirely neutral and entirely informative. "Perhaps Thursday, ma'am," she says. Thursday is 2 days away. It is an implicit negotiation. Not today. You have Mrs. Hartley coming at 3, and there is not enough time in the morning, and the kitchen fire will not be hot enough to heat sufficient water unless they start early. Not tomorrow. It is Tuesday, and Tuesday is the day Agnes's sister visits, and Agnes cannot be entirely relied upon on the afternoon of Tuesday. But Thursday is manageable. Thursday you have nothing until the evening, when you and your husband are expected at the Rawlings for dinner, and if you start the bath early in the morning, by noon your hair will be near enough dry, and by 4 o'clock you will be entirely presentable, and none of the Rawlings guests will know anything at all. Yes, you say, Thursday. Agnes nods, satisfied. Crisis deferred, plan established, everyone knows their role. She picks up the used washcloth and the slop bucket and takes them to the top of the stairs, and you go down to breakfast, and your husband is already at the table behind his newspaper, and Beatrice is being managed by the nursemaid with varying degrees of success, and the house begins its daily work, and 2 days away, around a corner you cannot quite see yet, is the bath. But today is not Thursday, today is Tuesday, and Tuesday in Islington in November 1873 means a great many things, none of which is a bath, and all of which are their own kind of story. The kitchen is Agnes's territory in the mornings, and you are permitted to enter it, but you enter it carefully, in the way of someone who knows. The territory belongs to someone else. It is warmer than the rest of the house. The range has been going since 6 o'clock, a heavy iron range that burns through a quantity of coal that your husband monitors on the monthly bills with an expression of resigned disapproval. The warmth hits you as you push open the door, a dry coal fire warmth with the smell of toast and the particular smell of the range itself, the iron smell of metal kept perpetually hot. Agnes is at the range. The kettle is already singing, on the table, laid for one, because your husband has already eaten, because he leaves before you come down. There is a rack of toast, cut squares of yellow butter on a blue china dish, and the teapot wearing its wool cosy like a fat, comfortable hat. You pour tea. It is strong and very hot and dark, and you drink it standing by the range because the range is warm, and you're not yet fully warm, and the tea goes down into your chest like something being restored. Breakfast in a household like yours is not the enormous meal that Victorian fiction would have you believe. That is breakfast at a country house, at a lord's table, with a sideboard laden with dishes and kippers and kidneys and devilled bones and cold ham, and a great many things that require a great many servants to produce and maintain. Your breakfast is toast, sometimes an egg on Sundays, tea always, and a great deal of it. It is a practical meal, eaten quickly, while the day assembles around you. While you eat, the house is doing its work. Agnes is doing her work, which is constant and physical and unglamorous, and which you are aware of in the abstract and do not think about in sufficient detail. She has already been up for 2 hours when you come downstairs. She was up at 4:30 to black the grate. The black leading, the brushes, the dust that goes everywhere, the specific grime of iron polish on hands and apron, and reset the fire and get the range going. She has swept the hall and the main stairs. She will, after breakfast, carry up the water for the nursery and clear the breakfast things and begin the mid-morning cleaning, and somewhere in the middle of all of this she will also receive her sister, who lives in Bermondsey and walks 3 miles every Tuesday and brings news of the wider family, and they will sit together in the kitchen for exactly 1 hour, because that is how long Agnes allows herself before she feels the pull of the work undone. Agnes's own washing is simpler than yours by necessity and not by choice. She has a basin in her attic room and the same cold water and the same efficiency, and she washes herself in the morning and does what needs doing and gets on with the day. The question of a bath for Agnes, not a slipper bath, not the copper tub on the kitchen floor, but even the public bathhouse, which is 2pence a visit, is a question of time and money and a half day, and she gets 1 half day a week, Sunday afternoon after the midday dinner, and that half day is for church if she's being good and for her own life if she isn't, and a bath takes 2 hours and costs 2pence, and those 2 hours come out of the same limited supply as everything else she does for herself. So Agnes does not bath very often either. But the circumstances of Agnes's infrequent bathing are not the same as the circumstances of yours, and this is the thing that Victorian society does not examine and does not want to examine, which is the class architecture of cleanliness. The idea that cleanliness is virtue, that to be clean is to be good, to be respectable, to be worthy, is everywhere in Victorian moral discourse, in the pamphlets and the sermons and the advice columns and the novels. Cleanliness is next to godliness. The phrase is used so often it has lost its shape, become wallpaper. But the practical resources required to be clean, the hot water, the time, the servants to carry it, the space in the house to bathe privately, the leisure to sit by the fire while your hair dries, the money for decent soap and the flannel, and the good china basin on the marble-topped washstand. These are not distributed equally. They are distributed along the same lines as everything else. You have them. You have most of them at least. You're not rich. A solicitor's wife in Islington is comfortable, is respectable, is the kind of person who can afford a washstand with a marble top and a parlour maid, but she's not the kind of person who has a bathroom. Not yet. Not in 1873, when a dedicated room for bathing is still a mark of considerable prosperity, and most houses your size simply don't have one. The slipper bath comes up from the kitchen when needed, carried by Agnes, and the water is heated in the copper and carried up in jugs by Agnes, and Agnes empties it again afterwards, and the whole thing is possible, but it is not easy, and it is not free, and it costs something in effort and time and coal that registers somewhere in the household accounts, even if nobody names it. Agnes does not have marble. Agnes does not have a parlour. Agnes has an attic room with a basin and a pitcher, and the same cold November morning, and a great deal less time and a great deal less of everything else. But both of you will present yourselves to the world today, and both of you will be assessed by the world as clean or not clean, and the criteria applied will not be the same. This is Victorian England. The criteria are never the same. Let me take you out of the kitchen and into the morning, because the morning is where the story lives, and it is already past 8, and the calls you have to make today will not make themselves. The street outside smells of London in a way that makes the indoor smell seem sweet and domestic. The outside smell of Islington in November is coal smoke, first and overwhelming, the kind of smoke that comes from every chimney in every house in the street, and the street behind and the streets beyond that, until the whole city is one vast low cloud of combustion sitting just above the rooftops. Below the coal smoke, the horses. There are horses on every street, always, and horses are large and warm and productive, and what they produce gets managed to varying degrees but never entirely. The road surface at the edge of the gutter is a compacted mixture of cobblestone and the material that horses contribute, and the general debris of a street that never quite gets clean, and it is wet today from last night's rain, and it smells accordingly. You have boots, good leather boots that lace up the ankle and keep the worst of the street away from your feet, and you have your skirt hitched slightly, not improperly, not so high as to be observed and remarked upon, but the approved few inches of hitch that allows a lady to move through a wet street without dragging the hem of her dress through the edge of the gutter. This is a daily calculation. How high is too high for propriety? How low is too low for the skirt to survive? The middle path between decency and practicality is narrow, and you navigate it with the confidence of someone who has been navigating it for years. Mrs. Hartley lives 4 streets away, in a house that is almost identical to yours from the outside. The same narrow Georgian terrace, the same black railings, the same 3 steps up to the door with the iron boot scraper on the second step, the same area, steps going down to the kitchen entrance below street level. The differences are on the inside, where Mrs. Hartley has a little more money than you, and a little more furniture, and a rather better carpet in the drawing room, and where she has a bath, an actual bathroom. Her husband, who is in import and export and had been more successful at it than most, had the back bedroom on the first floor converted last year. There is a proper porcelain tub now, with copper pipes that run from a tank in the loft heated by a separate boiler, and hot water on demand, or at least on the demand of the boiler being lit and the tank being allowed to heat, which takes an hour. Mrs. Hartley bathes twice a week, and she mentions this with a casualness that you recognise as not casual at all, that is precisely calibrated to convey modernity and prosperity without appearing to boast, which it is appearing to boast, but in a way that falls within the acceptable parameters of female conversation about domestic matters. "George thinks it's entirely necessary at my time of life," she said once, which was a strange thing to say because she is 34 and in robust health. But you understood what she meant, which is that George has decided bathing is modern and hygiene is progress, and a bathroom is a mark of the kind of man he is and the kind of household he runs. The bathroom is, in its way, as much a social statement as the good carpet. You knock on Mrs. Hartley's door. Her parlour maid answers, a pale girl who can't be more than 16, with a cap that is slightly crooked, who takes your coat and card and leads you upstairs with the slightly too fast pace of a girl who has not quite learned the speed at which visitors should be processed. The house smells different from yours. Not better or worse, just different. There is something in the wallpaper paste, or the particular coal they use, or some combination of family and furniture and routine that makes every house smell specifically like itself. Mrs. Hartley's house smells of beeswax and something floral, and underneath everything, very faintly, the carbolic soap she's been reading about in the ladies' papers. Carbolic soap. You have heard of this. It is the soap that Dr. Lister has been using in his surgical theatre since the 1860s. The antiseptic soap, the soap that kills the invisible agents of disease that Dr. Lister believes, and that not everyone in the medical establishment agrees, are responsible for wound infections and surgical fever. Carbolic acid. The smell of it is sharp and chemical and assertive, and someone has decided that what works in a surgical theatre will work in a domestic bathroom. And Mrs. Hartley has embraced this because Mrs. Hartley embraces progress. She's in the drawing room when you come up, standing by the window with a magazine in her hand, the Illustrated London News, which she reads before she sets it aside to indicate that she has been waiting for you. She's dressed in a plum-coloured afternoon gown with braid trim, and her hair is very smooth, and she smells of something French. She's also, you know, without having to examine the evidence too closely, freshly bathed, because it is Tuesday, and Mrs. Hartley bathes on Tuesdays. "Eleanor," she kisses the air beside your cheek. You do the same. The two of you sit down. The parlour-maid brings tea. The ritual of the call arranges itself around you. The teacups, the small cakes Agnes made yesterday, and you brought in a box, the comfortable chairs positioned at the correct angle for conversation. Outside the window, the November street continues. A dray horse clatters past. A boy in a red cap is selling something in a voice too high and fast to decipher. "You look well," says Mrs. Hartley, which is the opening gambit of every call ever made and means, simultaneously, nothing at all, and a comprehensive assessment of the current state of you. You say the same thing back. She does look well, actually. The bath, possibly, or the French scent, or simply the particular afternoon light of November, which can be kind if the clouds are right and the fire in the drawing room is making everything golden and warm. You talk about the things you talk about. The Rawlings dinner on Thursday, whether Miss Jameson's engagement to young Mr. Fletcher is a good match, the consensus being that it is not a brilliant one but is probably wise. The state of the Regent's Canal, which a neighbour said was smelling particularly terrible this month, though it always smells terrible, and the neighbour in question is prone to finding things particularly terrible when they are only averagely terrible. The question of Christmas and what you are doing for it. And then, because you are friends, and because the magazine is still on the side table and it is open to a specific page, Mrs. Hartley asks what you think of the new argument that bathing too often damages the natural oils of the skin. You put down your teacup. This is a live topic. This is the kind of topic that has been appearing in the ladies' papers and the medical columns with increasing frequency over the past decade. The ongoing Victorian argument about bathing, about how much, how often, how hot, with what, and what the medical consequences of getting any of these things wrong might be. And the medical consequences, in the world of 1873 medicine, can apparently be quite severe. Dr. Pembridge says, you begin, which is how you usually begin when you're about to deliver medical opinion. Because Dr. Pembridge is your doctor, and he is the authority on your constitution in particular, and on health in general. That the natural oils of the skin are protective, that to wash them away too aggressively or just with too much soap, too frequently with too hot water, leaves the skin open. Open, that's the word he used. Open to the bad air, to the cold, to the miasma that everyone in 1873 still believes. Despite John Snow's work on the cholera pump in Broad Street nearly 20 years ago, despite the growing evidence for germ theory, despite a dozen years of Lister's antiseptic surgeries, is the primary mechanism of disease transmission. The bad air rises from the sewers and the Thames and the graveyards and the slaughterhouses and enters through the open pores of skin unwisely exposed. This is the theory. This is the fear. And the implication of the theory is that bathing, if done incorrectly, is not just unpleasant but genuinely dangerous. Dr. Pembridge has opinions about the temperature of bath water. He thinks it should be tepid, not hot, not cold, but body temperature, so the pores do not open too wide and admit the miasma, but also do not close too tight and prevent the natural excretions from escaping. He thinks you should not immerse the head. Absolutely not the head. The head is particularly vulnerable. He thinks the whole operation should take no more than 20 minutes and should be followed immediately by vigorous toweling and warm clothing and a period of rest near a fire. He is not entirely opposed to bathing. He is not one of the doctors who considers it entirely dangerous, but he approaches it as a medical procedure requiring specific conditions and proper precautions, not as something you do simply because you feel like it. Mrs. Hartley's view is more modern. Her husband's doctor takes a different position, which is that regular bathing is in fact health-giving, that the removal of accumulated bodily products from the skin surface improves circulation and prevents disease rather than causing it, and that the domestic bathroom is a mark of a progressive and health-conscious household. This is also a real medical position in 1873. The two positions coexist. They are debated in the medical journals and the popular press. When you read the ladies' magazines, you find them side by side. The column that says "bathe more often for your health," and 2 pages later, the column that says "be careful, bathe with moderation, don't let the cold air reach your wet skin." Victorian medicine has not yet decided. It is in the process of deciding. Germ theory is winning slowly against miasma theory, and with it comes a clearer understanding of what soap actually does and what disease actually is, and how one might actually prevent the other. But the process takes time. Science does not simply announce a truth and have everyone believe it simultaneously. It percolates, it argues, it gets into the newspapers and then into the ladies' magazines and then into the conversations of women in drawing rooms in Islington on November afternoons, and by the time it reaches the drawing room, it has been filtered through every layer of interpretation and class interest and personal experience, and has come out looking somewhat different from what it was. "George thinks twice a week is perfectly correct," says Mrs. Hartley. "More often than that, and you begin to seem peculiar. Less often and—" She pauses, doesn't finish. The pause does the work. Less often and something that is not named. Something that she and you both know, because it is the thing that both of you navigate daily, the invisible pressure of it, The thing that drives the morning wash and the violet water and the detachable collar and the 38 days and the conversation with Agnes about Thursday. Thursday, you say. Not quite to Mrs. Hartley, almost to yourself. I'm planning to bathe on Thursday, before the Rawlings' dinner. Good, says Mrs. Hartley with a warmth and relief that is slightly too naked for the drawing-room, and then immediately says something about the Rawlings' cook, and the last time she was at a dinner party there, and whether the beef was overcooked, and the moment passes, smoothly, the way it always passes, because this is how it works. The thing is named in the exact amount required to accomplish its purpose, and then covered over again by something else, by beef and cook and the social machinery of women who have learned that the mechanics of their own bodies must be managed deftly and quietly, and in the spaces between other things. You finish your tea. You make your excuses at 4 o'clock, because your husband will be home at 7, and the dinner has to be started, and Beatrice will need attending to before bed, and Mrs. Hartley sees you to the door, and says you must come again soon, and means it, and you mean it when you say the same, and you step back out into the November street with the coal smoke and the wet cobblestones and the dray horse that is still there, or perhaps a different dray horse doing similar work in similar weather, and you walk home through the grey afternoon with your skirt hitched and your boots precise on the pavement, and your body warm inside its 4 layers, and your hair firmly pinned, and your appointment with Thursday settling into the coming week like a small certain point of light. But let me take you somewhere else for a moment. Let me take you away from Islington and its drawing rooms and its polite conversations about bathing frequency, because the story of Victorian women and water is not only the story of women like Eleanor, not only the story of the drawing room and the slipper bath and the Thursday appointment, it is just as much the story of a much larger territory, and to understand that territory you need to come with me. Come to Southwark first, cross the river, go south into a different city, a city that shares the same sky as Islington, but lives very differently under it. There is a woman here whose name is Mary. She is not Mary anyone in particular. She's 26 years old and she works in a match factory in Bermondsey, not yet the Bryant and May factory that will become famous for the strike in 1888, but one like it. The same industry, the same process, the same smell of phosphorus that clings to the workers who come home every evening, carrying the factory home with them in their skin and their clothes and their breath. Mary has a room in a house in a court off Tooley Street, a room she shares with 2 other women who also work and who pay 1/3 of the rent each, 6pence a week, which is not a small amount when you earn 7 shillings a week on a good week, and less when the factory is slow. The room is small. It has a window that looks into the court, a yard of grey sky between the buildings, never enough light, never enough air. There is a bed that all 3 women share, not because they particularly want to, but because a second bed would cost money and the room is barely large enough for the one. There is a washstand with a chipped basin. There is a single drawer between them. There's a hook on the back of the door where their outdoor things hang. There is under the bed a chamber pot. The court itself has a pump. 1 pump for the 8 houses that face it, which means 1 pump for the 40-odd people who live in those houses, which means a queue at the pump in the mornings and another queue in the evenings, and water, that is, depending on the day and the depth of the well and the proximity of the drainage that runs under the court, more or less fit to drink. More or less. The court has not yet had a cholera outbreak this year. It had one in 1866. 7 people died. Mary does not have a Thursday appointment. Mary does not have a slipper bath in the kitchen, or an Agnes to carry the water, or a husband whose income permits the planning of such things 2 days in advance. Mary has the pump in the court and the shared basin in the shared room, and the sixpence-a-week relationship with cleanliness that looks nothing like Eleanor's, but is, in its own way, just as managed, and just as careful, and just as much a daily negotiation between what is necessary and what is possible. There is a public bathhouse. There are in fact several by this point in London. The bathhouse movement has been growing since the Baths and Washhouses Act of 1846, which gave local authorities the ability to build and operate public baths, and in the intervening years a number have been built across the city, in the poorer neighbourhoods especially, the neighbourhoods where private bathing is not an option. The one nearest Mary's Court charges 2d for a cold bath and 4d for a warm one. It is open 6 days a week. The attendant gives you soap, hard soap, yellow soap, the cheap kind, and a towel that has been laundered in bulk but that still sometimes carries the ghost of the previous user, a faint warmth, and the smell of someone else's skin. You have 20 minutes. The attendant knocks after 20 minutes. You vacate. The next woman comes in. Mary goes to the bathhouse once a week when she can afford the 2d and has the time, which is not every week. She goes to the pump every morning and every evening. She washes what she can reach with what she has. She manages the phosphorus smell with a particular determination, because the phosphorus smell is not simply unpleasant. It marks her, the way all factory smells mark their workers, tells anyone within 6 feet what she does and therefore what she is, and this matters to her because the phosphorus is not the only smell on her, and the factory is not all she is. She has a life beyond the factory. She has a church she attends sometimes, and a young man she walks out with on Sunday afternoons, and a sister in service in Whitechapel, whose household she visits on her half-days. She has a self that exists beyond the factory floor, and she insists on that self with the resources she has, which are the pump, and the chipped basin, and the 6d, and the occasional 4d for a warm bath on a cold Saturday evening, when the week has been particularly long. The calculus of Victorian cleanliness. You see how it works. The resources are different. The need is the same, and the need, I want to be clear about this, the specific human need to be clean, to feel clean, to not carry your own smell with you into every room you enter, to have some control over how you present yourself to the world. This need is not a luxury. It does not belong only to Eleanor and her marble washstand and her Agnes. It belongs to Mary as well, as completely and as urgently, and the fact that it is harder to meet for Mary than for Eleanor is not a law of nature. It is a law of economics, which is a different thing, a thing that can be changed. But I am getting ahead of the story and ahead of the history, because the reform of that economics takes decades, and we are only in 1873, and there are still many years of pump water and chipped basins before the council housing, and the indoor plumbing and the hot running water that will eventually, not in Mary's lifetime and not in Eleanor's, but eventually, change the practical landscape of cleanliness in London beyond recognition. Let me come back to Eleanor, back to Islington, back to the slow approach of Thursday. Wednesday arrives with the particular quality of Wednesdays in November, which is that they are entirely without distinguishing feature. The light is the same grey, the street the same wet, the coal smoke the same general occupation of every breath. You do your morning wash at the cold wash stand. Agnes brushes your hair. You put on the brown day dress, a different one today. The blue needs the collar changing. Agnes has taken it to soak, and you go downstairs to breakfast, and your husband says good morning over the top of his paper without putting the paper down. which is how he says good morning every morning and is a form of affection you have come to understand as such. He's a clean man, your husband. Charles Ashworth, solicitor, 34 years old, originally from Derbyshire, a man of regular habits and specific views on most subjects. His views on cleanliness are not unusual for a professional man of his time. He washes his face and hands every morning. He shaves every other day with a straight razor and a brush and a cake of shaving soap that has a pleasant smell you associate entirely with him. He changes his collar daily, he has clean linen twice a week, and he baths. This is his schedule, maintained with the regularity of all his schedules, every Saturday evening. The Saturday evening bath is a ritual. Agnes heats the water. The tub comes up from the kitchen. Your husband locks the bedroom door and uses the whole operation with what you imagine to be the brisk efficiency of a man who considers bathing a practical requirement rather than a pleasure. You've never seen your husband in the bath. This is not unusual. This is in fact entirely correct. The bedroom is managed with a privacy between you that is both intimate and formal. You share the bed and each other's company and certain other things, but the actual physical logistics of washing and dressing are largely managed separately. You attended by Agnes and your husband attending to himself, or not attending to himself as the case may be. The private body is private. The managed body, the dressed, presented, correct body, is the public one, even within a marriage, even within the privacy of your own house. And yet, Wednesday evening after supper, after Beatrice has been put to bed, and the house has settled into its quiet and your husband is reading by the fire, you sit across from him with your mending, and you are aware, as you occasionally are, not constantly, not with distress, just occasionally, with the matter-of-fact awareness of a body that lives close to other bodies, that the room smells of the two of you, of coal fire and supper and the particular combined warmth of two people who have shared this house for 5 years, of his shaving soap faded now to something very faint, and your violet water also faded, and underneath both of those the plain human smell of living, of two bodies in close proximity across a domestic day. It's not an unpleasant smell. I want to be very clear about this, because I have used the word smell many times now, and I want you to understand what I mean and what I do not mean. I do not mean a stench. I do not mean something that would cause a modern person to leave the room rapidly. I mean an honest smell, a real smell, a smell that belongs to this room and these people and this November, and is as specific to this life as the coal smoke or the shaving soap or the wool of the carpet. The smell of two people living together. It has been in the world since the first human being shared a space, and will continue as long as human beings do, and it is only the particular circumstances of the last century, with its hot running water and its multiple daily showers and its deodorant soaps and its antiperspirant sprays, that have made it seem like something to be eliminated rather than simply managed. But Thursday is tomorrow, and you think about it as you sew. The logistics. The copper will need to start early, 7 o'clock or even 6:30, to have enough hot water ready by 9, because the copper takes time to heat, and the amount of water you need for the tub is significant, 6 to 8 jugs of it, and they have to be carried upstairs, and the tub itself has to be carried up from the storage room off the kitchen where it lives, folded flat against the wall for the weeks between uses. Agnes will need her sister to come on a different day this week, or perhaps not come at all. Agnes cannot manage all of it alone, not the copper and the carrying and the tub and also the regular morning duties. You'll have to speak to Agnes about this tonight or very early tomorrow. You put your mending down, cross the room. Tell your husband you're going to speak to Agnes about tomorrow. He looks up from his book. He's reading Trollope, you know the cover, you've seen it on the bedside table for the past week, and says, "Bath Day," with the casual knowledge of a man who has absorbed the rhythms of his household the way he has absorbed everything else about his domestic life, accurately and without much comment. Thursday, before the Rawlings dinner. He nods, returns to Trollope. This has been communicated and processed and filed and requires no further attention. You go downstairs to speak to Agnes. Agnes is in the kitchen. She's sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a piece of the pie left from supper, and she stands up when you come in, which she always does, and which you always tell her is not necessary and which she always does anyway. You sit down opposite her. You sit in the kitchen with Agnes sometimes when the evening is quiet, because you like the warmth of the range and because Agnes is sensible company, and you discuss Thursday. The logistics are these. The copper must start at 6:30. Agnes will need to be up by 6 to get it going, which means Agnes gets up at 6 instead of 4:30 and skips the great blacking in the morning, which can be done in the evening instead. The tub comes up before anything else while the water is heating. The first 6 jugs go in at 9. You get in the bath at 9:15. Agnes empties it at 11, by which time the water will be grey and cold, and you will have been sitting in it for perhaps 40 minutes, which is longer than Dr. Pembridge recommends, but which you have found, from experience, is the minimum amount of time required to actually accomplish what a bath is supposed to accomplish when you only do it every month or so. The hair is the question. It always comes down to the hair. If you wash your hair in the bath, which you can, sitting forward with Agnes pouring the warm water carefully over your head, your hair uncoiled and falling around you, heavy and wet and smelling of the egg yolk and vinegar rinse that is one of the recommended methods for cleaning hair without stripping it entirely. Then the drying takes until 2 o'clock at the earliest, sitting very close to the fire in the bedroom with the hairbrush and the heat and the slow steam rising from the mass of it. This means you have from 2 to 4 o'clock to get dressed and do your hair and be presentable for the Rawlings dinner at 7. 2 hours for the dressing, and the hair is possible but not comfortable. If you do not wash your hair, and here is the calculation that has to happen every single time. The assessment of whether the hair can go another 2 weeks or whether it is genuinely past the point of management with brushing alone. Then the bath takes less time. You are out of the tub by 10:30. Agnes helps with the initial toweling, and then you manage the rest yourself. And you have from 11 o'clock onward to dress slowly and properly, and arrive at the Rawlings with the correct hair and the correct composure. You have looked in the mirror honestly this evening, without the morning light that makes everything slightly kinder, and you have made your assessment. The hair needs washing. Not desperately, not the way it sometimes gets at the very end of a long period, when the oil becomes too much and it starts to coil in a way that resists the brush and picks up the coal smoke faster than it can be removed. Not at that point yet, but close enough that 2 more weeks without washing it would take it past close to something else. The hair too, you tell Agnes. She nods. She's already anticipated this. She knows the hair better than you do, in some ways, because she sees it from the back and from above, and has handled it daily for 3 years, and its condition is information she's been processing even when you weren't. "I'll put the copper on at 6, she says. "Good. And if there's not enough hot water for the hair, there will be. If there isn't, I can do the kettle." The kettle is a backup. If the copper water runs cold before you finish the hair rinse, Agnes will run down and boil the kettle and bring it up in a towel and pour it carefully, It is a known contingency. It has happened before. The house has systems for this. All houses of this type have systems for this, the improvised systems of households that have not yet been designed with plumbing in mind, that are managing bodily requirements with resources that were not specifically installed for the purpose. You go to bed early, not because you are tired, or not only because you are tired, but because tomorrow requires an early start, and because the knowledge of tomorrow's bath is doing something specific to this evening. Something that you can feel in the way you move through the bedroom, the way you sit at the dressing table while Agnes unpins your hair. There is a slight relief to it, a slight loosening of something that you had not particularly noticed was tightened. You are looking forward to Thursday's bath the way you look forward to other things that are not luxuries, but are not quite necessities either. Things that are simply good, simply right, simply part of being in a body that is well tended and acknowledged and attended to. You're looking forward to being clean, properly clean, full body clean. Agnes unpins the hair in silence, which is her evening mode. She saves her conversation for mornings and sometimes for the kitchen in the evenings, but the bedtime unpinning is usually quiet. Both of you a little tired, moving through the familiar choreography. The pins come out and your hair falls, and there is the usual slight smell of it, the oil and the coal smoke and the warm human smell. And you look in the dressing table mirror and think, tomorrow, and then you sleep. Thursday morning. The copper starts at 6:30. Agnes is slightly late. She overslept by 20 minutes. And you hear her clattering in the kitchen below and feel the shift in the house's usual rhythms that says something is being done that is not the usual thing. The range roars. The copper, which is the large iron pot built into the corner of the kitchen beside the range, begins its slow work. You can hear faintly the water beginning to move in it, a deep occasional sound, the first intimation of heat working through a large volume of water. You wash at the basin as usual. Cold water, the morning face and neck routine, the efficiency of habit. Your body is doing what it does every morning, while somewhere below it a different kind of washing is being assembled. The tub comes up first. Agnes has recruited, you hear the voice, the particular Bermondsey accent, her sister, who has arrived early, who has been pressed into service, who is in fact helping lift the slipper bath from the kitchen storage room and carry it up the stairs. The slipper bath is a specific object. Oval, tin, painted dark green on the outside, white on the inside, narrow at one end where you sit with your back supported, wider at the foot, about 4 feet long in total. It weighs roughly 15 pounds empty and considerably more full. The bottom of it has a small square of flannel glued to prevent slipping. The interior has a single slight stain near the foot, a rust mark from a pin that fell in once year ago, that no amount of cleaning has entirely removed. It comes through the bedroom door sideways. Agnes and her sister manoeuvre it with the practiced awkwardness of people who have done this before, but do not have a technique that entirely solves the problem of the door frame. There is a moment of resistance, a bump, a muffled apology, and then the tub is in the room, on the square of old cloth that protects the carpet beneath it. The jugs begin, 6 trips up the stairs. Agnes with a jug in each hand. She is strong, Agnes, stronger than she looks, with the wiry strength of someone who does heavy work every day, and has done since she was 14, and a sister behind her with 2 more. Hot water from the copper, carefully, with the thick cloth wrapped around the jug handle to protect the hands. It is not quite boiling. Boiling water in a tin bath will be dangerous, but it is very hot. It steams as it hits the bottom of the tub. The steam rises into the bedroom air and the room immediately begins to smell different. Not the cold morning smell, not the cold smoke and shut-up room, but something warmer. Something that smells of heat and water and soap and imminent cleanliness. Agnes adds cold water from the pitcher to bring the temperature down. She tests it with her elbow, an instinctive gesture, the way nurses test milk, the elbow more sensitive than the hand to temperature. Nods, more hot, less hot. A balance is reached. You close the bedroom door. Agnes helps you undress. It is slower going off than on. The buttons require the hook again, the stays unlace. The petticoats and the cage and the long skirt accumulate on the chair in the corner. The chemise you keep on until the last moment, and then off. Bare. The air in the room is warm, warmed by the hot water in the tub and the small fire Agnes has lit. An extravagance. The bedroom fire on a weekday morning. But you cannot have a bath in a room at 45 degrees and then sit wet near the window, but still cool against your skin when the chemise comes off. You feel it. The air. You feel the specific fact of having no layers between yourself and the world. The slight chill and the slight exposure. The 4 inches of air between your skin and the chemise that are now just air. Your body in its entirety. All of it. Approximately 38 days of it. You step into the bath. The hot water comes up over your feet, your ankles, your calves. It hits the skin with a rush of temperature that travels immediately upward through your body, past your knees, past your hips as you lower yourself. A wave of heat that is also, underneath the heat, the particular sensation of water against skin that has not had water against it in some time. Skin that has been covered and wrapped and protected and tended at the edges for 38 days, but not until now immersed. The water closes around you, and there is a physical response to it that has nothing to do with cleanliness, strictly speaking. That is simply the body's response to being held in warm water. A deep and involuntary relaxation, a loosening of things that have been held, a sigh that comes from somewhere deep in the chest, a softening. You sit for a moment, just that. The steam rising around you, the fire making the room golden, the November morning outside doing its November things, while in here there is only this, the warm enclosed world of the bath. The first bath in 38 days. Then the soap. Agnes hands it to you. The household soap is a hard yellow cake, plain and practical. There is also, saved for bath days, kept in a small tin on the washstand, a nicer soap, a scented one, rose geranium, purchased from a chemist's in Holloway. You use the household soap for the practical work and the scented soap for the last rinse, the finishing, the thing that will be left behind on your skin for the hours after the bath. You know the logic of this without it being explained, because it is simply what you do, as it is what your mother did, as it is the accumulated domestic wisdom of the women before you, made practical and economical. The washcloth Agnes gives you is warm. She held it in the hot water first. It goes to work. Your arms, your neck, the back of your neck. The smell of the soap rising with the steam. Rose geranium is sweet, almost too sweet, but it is bath soap sweet, which is a different category of sweetness from other sweetnesses. It is the smell of once-a-month transformation, of being attended to, of the body finally being taken seriously in the way it deserves. You attend to yourself carefully. This is not a quick operation. The body is large and has many territories, and each one requires attention. The cloth and the soap and the hot water. And when you have been through all of them, all the usual and necessary territories, you call Agnes back for the hair. The hair is the ceremony. You bend forward in the tub, the water coming up close around you as you hunch forward, your hair falling loose over the front of the bath. Agnes kneels beside the tub. She's soaked a cloth across her knees to protect her dress, and begins to pour warm water from the jug carefully, starting at the nape and working forward, the weight of the water pressing the hair flat against your head, and then the egg yolk mixture, worked in with her fingers from the scalp outward, and more warm water, the vinegar rinse sharp and clean, and again the warm water to take it all away. The smell of vinegar and egg yolk is not taken individually, a beautiful smell, but taken together in this context, in the context of the bath and the steam and the rose geranium soap and the coal fire in the November room, it is the smell of clean, of properly clean, of the particular clean that comes from attending to the whole of yourself, not just the edges. Agnes towels the hair with a roughness that is efficient rather than careless, her hands squeezing the water from it section by section, wrapping it finally in a clean towel twisted into a turban that holds the warmth against your head. You're still in the bath. The water is cooler now. It cools faster than you expect, always, because the tub is tin, and tin conducts temperature both ways, and the room, despite the fire, is only warm in the approximate sense that English rooms are warm in November, which is to say less cold than outside. You let the water cool around you and stay a little longer, just a little, letting the last of the heat do its work. Then out. The large towel is warm. Agnes had it on the rail by the fire. You step out of the tub onto the cloth and Agnes wraps the towel around you, and there is a specific and unrepeatable comfort to this moment. The moment of coming out of a good bath into a warm towel in a warm room, that is available to the body at almost any point in history, and has probably been available since the Romans first understood the relationship between hot water and human happiness, and built the baths at Bath, which are why it's called Bath. But that is a different story for a different evening. You sit by the fire in your dressing gown. Agnes brings tea. Your hair, turbaned in the towel, is not yet dry. Not close to dry. Not for an hour. Not properly for 2. But the fire is working on it, drawing the moisture out slowly, and you sit and drink your tea and let it happen. This is the part the ladies' magazines never write about. Not the bath itself. There is a great deal of writing in various registers about the bath itself, about its health-giving properties or its dangers, about the proper temperature and duration and soap choice. But not this part. The sitting by the fire with the wet hair and the tea. The 2 hours of enforced stillness that a bath creates in a Victorian woman's morning. The particular suspended quality of the time between getting out of the bath and being dressed and back in the world. It is not quite leisure. You are waiting, essentially. You're waiting for your hair to be dry enough to do anything with. But it is not work either. It is a pause that the body has created for itself in the structure of the day. A necessary inefficiency. A window of enforced rest inside a life that does not generally permit windows of anything. You sit and drink your tea, and your mind does what minds do when bodies are made to be still. It moves. It covers ground. It goes to the Rawlings dinner tonight and considers what to wear. The black silk, probably, which needs the jet brooch and the white gloves and the fan that's in the box on the top shelf of the wardrobe. It goes to Beatrice and the nursemaid, and whether Beatrice has been eating enough. She was fussy at dinner last Tuesday and fussy again at breakfast. It goes to Christmas, still a month and a half away, and the question of her mother's visit and whether the visit will be comfortable or whether it will have the particular quality it sometimes has, a quality that you cannot quite name, a quality of assessment, of being assessed and found to be doing approximately right, approximately correct, near enough to what a solicitor's wife in Islington ought to be doing, but not fully right, not quite fully correct in ways that are never named but are present in every exchange. It goes for a moment to Mary. Not Mary specifically. You don't know Mary. But the woman at the pump, the women at the public bathhouse with their tuppence and their 20 minutes and their shared towels, the factory girls who come home smelling of their work and have nowhere to put it, except back into the narrow room and the shared bed and the morning's limited cold water. You think about this sometimes, not often. But the ladies' magazine that Mrs. Hartley gave you last month, a magazine with progressive tendencies, slightly ahead of the mainstream on certain social questions, had an article about the public bathhouses, about the numbers who used them, about the numbers who could not use them for want of the tuppence or the time or the proximity, about what it would mean, the article suggested gently, to think of clean water as something everyone might have access to, rather than something that came to you through wealth and servants and the accident of what kind of house you'd been born into or married into. You had read the article and thought, yes, that seems reasonable, and then turned the page to the pattern for a new sleeve style, and that had been that. But it is still there, somewhere in the background, and the bath has stirred it up, the way baths sometimes stir things up. The hot water loosening not just the physical surface, but the thoughts underneath it. By noon, your hair is half dry. By 1 o'clock it is dry enough to brush. Agnes does the brushing, 100 strokes, the silver brush, and your hair moves now with a different quality than it had this morning. The weight of the oil and the coal smoke gone, the natural texture of it coming forward, lighter, almost floating in the firelit air. It smells of the rose geranium soap. It smells clean in the unambiguous way that washed hair smells clean, which is different from the managed smell of brushed and oiled hair, and does not require any catalogue of interpretation. It simply smells clean. Agnes puts it up, 9 pins, sometimes 10. It takes 12 minutes. When she's done, you look in the mirror and the woman looking back at you is the same woman as always. Eleanor Ashworth, 29, brown hair, hazel eyes, the face of someone who lives well enough and worries moderately and thinks rather more than she lets on. But there is something different in the way she sits in the mirror today. A freshness, a lightness. The particular quality that comes from having been for 40 minutes in a tin bath in a firelit bedroom, simply a body, without the layers, without the managed surface, just the body itself in warm water attended to. You're not a different woman. The bath has not transformed you. Victorian cleanliness discourse would sometimes suggest otherwise, would sometimes reach for the language of renewal, of spiritual refreshment, of the clean body as an emblem of the clean spirit. And there is something in that, something true, but it is smaller and more specific than the rhetoric makes it. You simply feel better, specifically better, in the specific way that a body feels after being properly cared for, after the warmth and the soap and the hot water and the 2 hours by the fire. A comfortable body, a body that has been given what it asked for. You dress for the Rawlings dinner, the black silk as planned. Agnes helps with the buttons, 14 of them, the same 14 as always, and the jet brooch at the throat, and the gloves and the fan in its box. By 5 o'clock you are dressed. By 6, your husband is home and changed and making noises that indicate he is ready to leave approximately 20 minutes before you need to leave, which is his pattern and which you have factored into your dressing schedule. By 7 o'clock, you're at the Rawlings. The drawing room at the Rawlings is warmer than anywhere else in the city on this particular November evening, warmed by the combination of the fire and the dozen candles and the dozen people standing close together with the particular warmth that a group of well-dressed people generates when they have been standing together for 20 minutes. The room smells of beeswax candles and the pomade of the gentleman's hair and the perfumes of the ladies, rose water and orange blossom, and something French that Mrs. Rawling is wearing and that you cannot identify. And underneath all of it, beneath the flowers and the fragrance, the warm human smell of 12 people who've been in their clothes and their lives all day. Most of them are clean. Not all of them. This you know without examination, the way you know things about the world you've moved through long enough to read unconsciously. The Rawlings are clean. Mrs. Rawling has a bathroom. She's mentioned it. She is a woman who takes her hygiene seriously and considers it a statement. The Hendersons are probably clean. Dr. Henderson is a physician and has specific views on the matter and acts accordingly. The Mrs. Carver, the 2 spinster sisters who are at every dinner party in this part of Islington, and who dress always in grey and lavender and are unfailingly pleasant and unfailingly present. The Mrs. Carver are probably approximately clean, though one of them, the elder one, has about her in certain weathers a specific personal atmosphere that the room tonight is not providing enough ventilation to dissipate entirely. You notice this. Everyone notices this, probably, with the unconscious social processing that people do in groups. No one mentions it. No one will ever mention it. The elder Miss Carver has attended 24 dinner parties in this neighbourhood, and will attend 24 more, and the question of her bathing habits will never be raised by anyone in this room, because these are respectable people, and respectable people do not raise such questions, because cleanliness in Victorian society is simultaneously a matter of intense social importance, and a subject of almost impenetrable social silence. You discuss it in drawing rooms among women who know each other well. You allude to it obliquely in medical articles. You never, under any circumstances, say to Miss Carver, "You need to bathe more often. You manage. You all manage. You stand at a slight angle. You locate yourself near the window where the draught is marginally helpful. You talk to Mr. Henderson about his practice and to Mrs. Rawling about the new dining table, and to your husband about nothing in particular because you've been married 5 years and have developed the ability to communicate over a distance through small eye contact and slight movements of the head. The dinner is good. Mrs. Rawling's cook does not overcook the beef. Mrs. Hartley will be disappointed. And there is a soup and a fish course and a joint and a pudding, and the kind of wine that does not appear on your own table, a good claret from somewhere that Mr. Rawling mentions with a particular pride of a man who knows his cellar is better than most of his guests' cellars. You are seated between Dr. Henderson and Mr. Fletcher, the young man whose engagement to Miss Jameson you discussed with Mrs. Hartley only 2 days ago. Mr. Fletcher is agreeable. He is also, you think, not recently bathed. There is something in the warmth of the room that is drawing it out. The smell of a young man who was probably fine at 7 o'clock when he dressed for dinner, but who has been in a drawing room and then at a dinner table for 2 hours now, in candle heat, in wool and starch, and the combination has created a particular ambient quality in his immediate vicinity that is not quite unpleasant, and is not quite pleasant. You eat your soup. Dr. Henderson talks about medicine, which he always does, because medicine is his life, and dinner parties are his only audience for the things he wants to say about medicine. He has been following, with great interest, the work of Robert Koch, a young German physician who's been doing things with microscopes that Dr. Henderson considers potentially significant, though he is careful not to go too far out ahead of the evidence, because the last time he went out ahead of the evidence on a medical matter it had been embarrassing. The germ theory, though, Koch's work, Pasteur's work before it, the accumulating weight of evidence that disease is not transmitted through miasma, through bad air, but through specific tiny living things that are transmitted from person to person through specific mechanisms. If it's true, Dr. Henderson says, taking a careful spoonful of soup, then the implications for public health are extraordinary, not just for hospitals, for homes, for ordinary domestic life. You ask what he means. He means, if disease is transmitted by germs and germs can be washed away, destroyed, by soap and water, then the washing of hands is not merely a habit of propriety. It is a mechanism of genuine prevention. The clean body is not the morally superior body. It is the epidemiologically safer body. Cleanliness is not next to godliness. It is next to not dying of cholera. This is the revolution, not the revolution of the soap or the tub or the hot water. Those are older, those are ancient. But the revolution of understanding, the scientific revolution that is slowly dismantling miasma theory and building, in its place, a new understanding of what dirt is and what it does and how to stop it. An understanding that will, over the next 30 years, change everything. Change the way hospitals work and the way kitchens are run, and the way streets are cleaned and the way babies are delivered and the way wounds are treated. And change, eventually, the way bathing is understood, not as a health risk, not as a dangerous exposure to cold air, not as a once-a-month or once-a-week negotiation with the logistics of hot water and servants and hair drying, but as a daily necessity, a health measure, a specific physical act with specific preventative properties that can be measured and proven and recommended by doctors with the full weight of scientific evidence behind them. But that is 30 years away, 40. The public health revolution of the late Victorian period, the great sewerage systems and the Clean Water Acts and the improving urban housing and the slowly improving domestic plumbing and the slowly improving understanding of how disease works and how cleanliness prevents it, all of that is coming. It is gathering even now in the medical journals and the parliamentary debates and the sanitary engineering offices and the laboratories of men like Koch and Pasteur. It is coming. Tonight you're at the Rawlings dinner table in November 1873 and you smell of rose geranium soap, and Dr. Henderson is explaining germ theory between courses, and the elder Miss Carver is on the other side of the table, and the room is quite warm, and the candles are very bright, and your husband is doing the small thing with his eyes from across the table. That means he is ready to leave whenever you are. You are ready. You exchange the necessary pleasantries on the way out. Your coat is brought. The street is cold and very dark and very quiet after the warmth of the drawing room, and you and your husband walk home through November Islington with your breath making small clouds in the air before you and your boots making their familiar sound on the wet cobblestones. "Good evening," he asks. "Good." Dr. Henderson talked about medicine. He always does. He was interesting, actually, about germs. Your husband makes a sound that is interested but not committed to full engagement, which is his mode for the walk home from dinner parties. He's warm and fed and slightly whines and content, and the walk home is his decompression, and you know this and permit it, and walk beside him in the comfortable silence of people who've been going home together for 5 years. At the door, the key. The hallway smells of the house, the familiar particular smell that hits you every time you come in from outside, the smell of your own home, which you never notice when you are in it but always notice in the first moment of re-entering it from the street. Coal smoke and beeswax and supper and the faint rose geranium of your bath, which has spent the day drifting through the upstairs rooms, up the stairs, the bedroom. The fire is banked low but still warm. Agnes has turned down the bed. You undress in the warm room. The black silk comes off. Agnes is long asleep, but you have managed your own dress before and can manage it now. The buttons only barely, certain of them awkward at the angle required, but managed. The stays, the petticoats, the chemise on, into the bed. The sheets are clean. Agnes changed them yesterday, in preparation for the bath, because clean sheets after a bath is its own rule, its own internal logic. You do not wash yourself and then get into week old sheets. That reverses the work. Clean body, clean linen. The cotton is cold when you first get in but warms quickly, your body heat spreading through it. You lie in the clean sheets and you smell the rose geranium still on your skin, faint now, the last trace of it, and you think about Thursday's bath, which has now been had and is now finished, and which will not be had again for some weeks, and you feel the satisfaction of something accomplished, something necessary attended to, something the body asked for and was given. The sounds of the street outside, a horse, distant, a door somewhere. The particular deep quiet of November at this hour, when even London has reduced its noise to something manageable. Your husband is asleep within minutes. He always is after dinner parties. He has that particular male capacity for immediate sleep that you have observed with a mixture of affection and mild resentment for 5 years, and have concluded is simply a feature of how he is made, like his height and his handwriting. You're not asleep yet. Let me tell you what I am thinking about, lying here with the rose geranium and the clean sheets and the distant horse and the November quiet. I am thinking about Mary, not Mrs. Hartley, who has her twice-weekly bathroom bath and her carbolic soap and her modern husband. Mary, the woman at the match factory, the woman with the tuppence and the 20 minutes and the shared basin, the woman who is probably tonight in her room off Tooley Street, lying in the bed she shares with 2 other women, in the particular warmth and smell of 3 working people sharing a small space, with the pump in the court and the morning bringing exactly what yesterday brought and the day before that, and the tuppence sometime this week, or maybe next week depending on the week, and the bathhouse with the 20 minutes and the shared towel. What does clean mean to Mary? Not as a lesser question, not as the same question in reduced circumstances, as its own question with its own answer, shaped by the specific life she is living and the specific resources she has. Here is what I think it means. I think it means the same thing it means to you, to Eleanor, to any person in any century who has ever stood at a washstand, or stepped into a tub, or bent over a pump in a court in Bermondsey on a cold morning. It means I am attending to myself. I am here. I am present in this body and I am taking it seriously, as seriously as the morning and the work and the other people in my life allow me to. I am asserting, with cold water and hard yellow soap and a rough cloth, and 20 minutes that cost tuppence I had to think about spending, that I'm worth attending to. This is not a luxury. I want to be very clear about this. The attending to the body is not a luxury. the bathhouses, the public baths that the Baths and Washhouses Act authorised, the twopenny baths in Southwark and Bermondsey and Whitechapel. These were not luxuries provided by a benevolent government to the deserving poor. They were a recognition, however incomplete, however insufficient, however tangled up with the moralising language of Victorian public health discourse about cleanliness and virtue, and the improvement of the lower classes, however tangled up with all of that. They were a recognition that the body's need for water is not contingent on income, that what Eleanor has in her marble-topped washstand and her slipper bath and her Agnes and her Thursday appointment is not a different kind of need from what Mary has. It is the same need. It simply has more resources to meet it. This is 1873. The resources are extremely unequally distributed. The gap between Eleanor's bathroom in progress and Mary's pump in the court is a gap of about 2 miles of London streets and about £300 a year of income. And in 1873, those 2 miles and that £300 are practically infinite. They are different worlds. They are different countries living under the same coal smoke, sharing the same river. The reforms that are coming, the public health reforms of the 1880s and 1890s, the improved housing acts and the waterworks bills and the slowly improving provision of hot water in even modest homes, the spread of the bathtub from the houses of the rich to the houses of the merely comfortable to eventually the houses of the working class. These are still a generation away. They will come. They are beginning to come, even now, in the parliamentary debates and the sanitary engineering offices and the slowly shifting medical consensus and the slowly shifting social understanding of what disease is and what prevents it. But tonight Mary is in her room, and you are in yours, and the gap between you is vast and largely invisible to both of you, because this is how vast and invisible gaps work. Each of you is looking at your own life from the inside of it. Each of you is doing what the day required and what your resources permitted and what the morning will ask again. Sleep now. The rose geranium is a ghost on the pillow. The street outside is finding its nighttime quiet. The November cold is pressing on the other side of the window. You are warm enough. You are clean enough. You are safe enough and comfortable enough and attended to enough. And the bed is good and the house is quiet and the morning is Thursday's gone and Friday's coming. And Friday asks nothing particular of you that you cannot give it. Let the weeks pass now. Let me take you faster through time, the way time goes in the body when the pattern is established and the days begin to accumulate. Because 38 days between baths sounds extraordinary now and was simply normal then, and the only way to understand that is to live through some of the days in between, to feel how the routine holds, how the morning wash, and the 100 strokes and the violet water at the wrists and the careful management of the collar and cuffs creates its own continuity, its own maintenance, its own answer to the question that will not stop being asked. December arrives. The cold in December is different from the cold in November. The cold in November is wet and grey and miserable, in a way that feels like complaint, like the weather voicing its objections. The cold in December is harder, more committed, a cold that has decided to be cold and is making a point of it. The water in the basin freezes most mornings, not solid, not a block, but a skim of ice across the surface that you break with your knuckle, and it clinks softly against the china before it dissolves. Your washing in December is faster. There is no dwelling at the cold basin. There is the minimum necessary, the face and the neck and the hands and the careful management of the territories that require it, and then you are done and dressed and downstairs where the range is going and the tea is hot and the warmth is all. Your hair is washed twice in December, once at the beginning of the month, before a small dinner party at which you needed to be presentable in a specific way. Once near Christmas, when your mother-in-law comes to stay for a week, and it is simply necessary, it is simply required. There is no version of your mother-in-law's visit in which your hair is managed rather than actually clean, because your mother-in-law has opinions about all things and the state of daughters-in-law's hair falls within their scope. The bath. December gives you 2 baths, one in the middle of the month, which is the regular one, the one you would have had approximately every 3 weeks or so in the ordinary rhythm of the household, and one on Christmas Eve, because Christmas Day you will be at church and then at table with your mother-in-law and Charles's brother and his wife. And the bath on Christmas Eve is armour, clean armour. The rose geranium and the white gloves and the best dress and the hair done correctly, these are the tools you bring to battle, and the battle is Christmas with the in-laws, which is not the most difficult battle you fight, but is one you approach with preparation. The Christmas bath is different. December gives it a quality November didn't have. The fire in the bedroom is bigger. Charles has given permission for the extra coal this week, his mother being present and coal being cheaper than the alternative version of his mother's visit, which is the version where she is cold. The room is warmer than usual, warmer than the bath day room in November, and the tub's water stays hot longer, and you sit in it longer, not 40 minutes but closer to an hour, because there is something about a warm room and a warm bath at the end of a December and the end of a year that makes it difficult to get out. The warmth wraps around you. The steam is dense in the warm air and the fire makes the ceiling orange, and outside it is absolutely cold and absolutely dark, and inside it is absolutely not, and the bath holds you in this fact with a certainty that your body understands better than your mind. Your mother-in-law arrives on the 23rd. She's a small, precise woman from Derbyshire, with grey hair dressed in a manner that suggests it was done in this manner in approximately 1855, and has not been significantly revisited since. She smells of lavender and something medicinal, and, if you're being honest, of herself. She is a woman of particular habits who has a particular schedule, and the schedule has been not quite met in the disruptions of the journey from Derbyshire. 2 days of train, and the cold waiting and the station and the grime of railway travel, which is genuinely quite grimy. The coal smoke from the engine working its way into everything in a very specific way that is different from the coal smoke of domestic life. She presents her cheek to you to kiss. You kiss it. She presents it to Charles to kiss. He kisses it. She presents it to Beatrice, who is nervous of her grandmother in the way that small children are nervous of people who regard them with an assessing attention rather than a warmly welcoming one, but who submits to the kiss with reasonable grace. "You look tired," says your mother-in-law to you. "Not at all," you say. "The journey was long. Shall I have Agnes bring tea?" You have tea. You have a great deal of tea over the following week. You have also a great deal of conversation that is largely structured around the things that are wrong, or not quite right, or in need of adjustment, or not quite what one might have expected, which is your mother-in-law's conversational mode, and which you navigate with the same efficient management that you bring to the morning wash. Quickly, effectively, without excessive fuss, attending to what is necessary and not dwelling longer than required. She sleeps in the guest room. Agnes makes the fire specially each morning, which Agnes does without being asked, but not without registering the extra work in a particular expression she gets around the eyes. You do your morning wash. You manage the household. On the 24th you bathe. On the 25th you go to church and come home and cook dinner, and your mother-in-law has a great deal to say about the beef, and Charles has a second glass of wine, and Beatrice falls asleep in her chair at the table, which is the best thing about Christmas with small children, the fact that they eventually fall asleep. By the 27th, your mother-in-law is back on the train to Derbyshire, and the house begins its slow exhalation, its long breathing out after the held breath of her presence. Agnes straightens the guest room with a thoroughness that borders on vengeance. You sit in the drawing room in the afternoon light and drink tea alone and feel, beneath the tiredness, something that is relief but is also something else, a kind of satisfaction. You managed. The household functioned. The bath was had, the hair was correct, the dinner was produced, the in-law was endured. The year is almost done and you have managed all of it. The new year comes in, January, February. The cold gets more serious about itself, committed in the way December was not quite. The frost is hard now, the pavement white in the mornings, and the water in the basin freezes every night without exception, and you have learned to cover the pitcher with a cloth against the cold. The bathing schedule continues, approximately every 3 weeks, sometimes 4. Once in February there is a gap of 5 weeks, because the month is very cold, and your cough is bad enough that Dr. Pembridge makes a visit and says very firmly that there will be no baths while the cough persists. The chest needs to be kept warm and dry. Any exposure to cold damp air could worsen the congestion significantly, and this is not, he says, a negotiable point. He says this in the tone of a man who has opinions that are not to be argued with, and who expects you to have the good sense to agree with him. You agree with him. You keep the chemise on and the fire higher, and manage the 5 weeks with the basin, and the morning ritual, and the careful economy of the washcloth, and feel, by the end of it, precisely as you feel at the end of every extended period without a bath, in need of one, ready. The particular readiness of a body that has been managed and maintained but not fully attended to, that is asking now in the particular wordless way that bodies have for the thing they need. It is February when you first hear seriously, in a social context, the argument about daily bathing. It comes from an unlikely direction. It comes from a magazine article that Mrs. Hartley gives you. She's a great giver of magazine articles. She has taken to marking them with a piece of ribbon about the hygiene movement in Germany. The Germans, it appears, are ahead of the English on the matter of regular bathing. There are hygienists in Germany, and the word hygienist, a medical person specifically devoted to the science of cleanliness, sounds new and slightly strange in English, but is being naturalized into the language at pace, who are arguing, with increasing scientific backing, that daily washing of the body is not merely possible but necessary. Daily. Every day. The body produces daily a quantity of waste products through the skin. They are being catalogued now, measured, named, that accumulate if not removed, and that create conditions favourable to the proliferation of the very germs that Koch and Pasteur have been identifying as the agents of disease. Daily. Every day. You read this, and your first response is practical, not moral. You think about the copper and the jugs and Agnes's back and the coal for the boiler and the hours of drying. You think about where, in an Islington house built in 1820 before anyone thought about bathrooms, a person was supposed to bathe daily. You think about the fact that a proper bath takes, from start to finish, including set-up and clean-up and hair-drying, most of a morning. A woman who bathes daily has time for nothing else in the morning. It is simply not possible. Not with the current resources. Not without a bathroom. A proper one, with a boiler and a tank and hot water on demand. The German hygienists, you strongly suspect, are imagining a Germany with considerably better domestic plumbing than Islington provides. But the idea settles somewhere. It settles in the place where ideas go that are not immediately actionable, but that feel true, that feel like the direction things are moving, that have the specific quality of being ahead of their time in a way that makes you want to keep them for later. Daily bathing, the idea of it. The idea of a world in which the bath is not an event, not a logistics operation, not a Thursday appointment coordinated between you and Agnes and the copper and your social calendar, but simply a thing you do every morning, like washing your face, like making tea, like breathing. It is not your world, not yet. But somewhere in the future of your daughter, Beatrice, 4 years old, sleeping in the nursery above you, it might be. It might be that when Beatrice is your age, when she is a solicitor's wife or a doctor's wife or whatever she becomes in the 1890s, the plumbing will have changed. The houses will have bathrooms. The hot water will come from the tap rather than the copper. The question of whether to bathe will have become not a logistical calculation, but simply a question of when. You fold the magazine article carefully along its crease and put it in the drawer of the writing desk. You don't know why you keep it. You just feel it should be kept. Let me take you now to spring, because spring changes things. Spring is March and then April, and the air on the streets of Islington begins to smell of something other than coal smoke, begins to smell of wet stone warming, of the particular sweetness that comes when the temperature has been below a certain point for 4 months, and then rises and everything that was locked in the cold begins to release. The plane trees in the park get their first pale leaves. The birds in the garden. You have a robin who considers the garden his personal territory and manages it with the aggression of a small landowner. Begin their full spring noise, which is nothing like the quiet of winter birds. Spring changes the body too. The cold that you have been inside for 4 months begins to lift, and with the lifting of the cold comes a shift in the smell of things. The coal fires are still going. They don't go out until June, really, the English spring being what the English spring is, but they go out earlier in the evenings now. The bedroom window can be opened slightly without risk of freezing. The air that comes through it carries something different from the sealed-in winter air. It carries movement. It carries the smell of the outside, which is still coal smoke and still horses, but also, underneath those, something green and rain-washed and alive. The body loosens in spring. The long winter holding of everything. The stays pulled tighter against the cold. The multiple layers that make every movement into a consideration. The enforced stillness of cold rooms and early dark begins to ease. The stays are the same, but the body inside them is different, more awake, more present, more aware of itself in the way that bodies get aware of themselves when the world stops being threatening and starts being warm. The bathing frequency in spring increases slightly, not dramatically, not to Mrs. Hartley's twice a week, but slightly. Once every 2 weeks, perhaps, rather than 3. The copper is easier to start when the kitchen is not fighting the cold on every side. The hair dries faster when the air moving through the bedroom window from the garden carries the early warmth of an April afternoon. The whole operation becomes lighter, quicker, less committed, and so it happens more. And there is a specific thing about spring bathing, a specific quality it has that winter bathing does not, which is this. In winter, the bath is a restoration, a return to a standard, an act of maintenance. In spring, the bath is a pleasure. There is a difference. The body in winter submits to the bath because it is necessary. The body in spring steps into the bath because it wants to, because the warm water on winter dry skin is a sensory event with something extra in it, something that is not quite the word pleasure, but is that family of feeling, the feeling of the body receiving something it has needed without knowing it needed it. The warm water and the loosening and the steam and the soap doing their work on skin that has been covered and layered and maintained but not immersed for months. April gives you a specific bath that I want to tell you about. A Saturday morning, unusually warm for April, the bedroom window standing open for the first time since autumn. The spring light falls differently from winter light, broader, higher, filling more of the room, reaching the corner where the washstand is, and the foot of the bed, corners that have been in winter shadow for months. The tub comes up, the water goes in, and when you get into it this time, in the spring light with the window open and the sound of the garden, the robin, indignant, making his objections to something in the apple tree, you stay for an hour, a full hour, longer than Dr. Pembridge would recommend. The water goes from hot to lukewarm, and you do not get out because the warmth of the room, and the warmth of the water and the light through the window, and the robin in the garden, and the April air on your bare shoulders above the waterline are all combining into something that is very simply, very specifically good. Agnes comes to ask if you need more hot water. You say yes. She brings the kettle, wrapped in the cloth, and pours it carefully. The water warms. You stay. This is what the bath is, at its most fundamental, stripped of the logistics and the class dynamics and the medical debate, and the 38-day gap, and the complicated Victorian negotiation between the body's needs and the world's requirements. A warm room, a body in warm water, a spring morning. The specific and simple good of being in a body that is warm and held and clean. Not the philosophical body, not the social body, not the body as it navigates the drawing room and the dinner party and the in-law and the managing of the household's accounts. The plain body, the one that breathes and sweats and needs water and is underneath everything, just a person, trying to get through the day, warm and fed and cared for. You get out eventually. The morning is getting on. Agnes is waiting with the towel. The hair will need doing before noon. Your husband is somewhere in the house with his paper, and Beatrice has been in the garden with the nursemaid and is muddy in a way that will require Agnes's attention later. But for now, the hour in the tub on the April morning, clean. Spring clean in the literal original sense. The deep cleaning that happens when the season turns, when the house is thrown open and the winter's accumulation of coal smoke and shut-up air is let out, and the light comes in. This is the spring clean of the self, the long winter of managed cleanliness and careful maintenance arriving finally at the open window and the garden and the warm water and the hour to yourself. This is enough. This is, in the particular circumstances of Eleanor Ashworth's life in Islington in the 1870s, exactly enough. Let me tell you something that I want you to hold on to as you drift towards sleep tonight. I want to tell you about the Thames in 1873, because the Thames is where this story lives at its foundation, under everything, under Eleanor's washstand and Mary's pump, and Mrs. Hartley's bathroom, and the bathhouses, and Dr. Henderson's germ theory, and the German hygienists, and the ladies' magazines, and Mrs. Beeton, and Dr. Pembridge, and all of it. The Thames is the reason for everything. The reason Victorian London is what it is. The reason the water is what it is. The reason the public health movement is what it is. the reason it is all so complicated and so contested and so slow to change. The Thames in 1873 is better than the Thames in 1858. In 1858 there was the Great Stink, the summer when the river became so overloaded with the sewage of 2 million people that the smell reached Parliament itself, that curtains soaked in chloride of lime were hung in the windows of the Houses of Parliament to make the chambers tolerable, that the press reported it as a crisis, and the politicians experienced it personally, and for once, personal experience and political will coincided, and the result was a decision. The city needed a new sewer system. Joseph Basil Gett, a name that deserves to be better known than it is. The engineer who designed the intercepting sewer system that began construction in the early 1860s and is still being completed in 1873, and that will, when it is done, fundamentally change the relationship between London and its own waste. 83 miles of large intercepting sewers running along the banks of the Thames, catching the outflow of the smaller sewers that previously deposited their contents directly into the river, carrying it downstream to pumping stations where it is discharged into the tidal river below the city, where the sea can deal with it. Not a perfect solution. Not the solution that would eventually be required as the city grew, but a massive infrastructural engineering answer to a massive problem, carried out by men working in conditions that were themselves filthy and difficult and dangerous, and paid for by a city that had finally understood, via its own nose, that the way it had been managing waste was not sustainable. The sewer system is why the Thames in 1873 is better than the Thames in 1858. Still not good, not clean, not the river that might be swum in, not the river that will eventually, much later, in the late 20th century, have salmon running through central London again, but not the river of the Great Stink. Better, improved, measurably, demonstrably, infrastructurally improved by the work of Basil Gett and his men, and the political will that the Great Stink produced, and the clean water, the water in the pump in Mary's Court, the water in Eleanor's pitcher. Where does it come from? From waterworks, private companies in 1873 that take water from the Thames at points above the city, filter it through beds of sand, and distribute it through iron mains throughout the city. The filtration is improving. It is not adequate by later standards. It has not yet been improved by the understanding of what specifically needs to be removed, the bacteria, the specific organisms that cause typhoid and cholera and all the rest of it, because that specific understanding is still being developed, is still in the laboratories of Koch and Pasteur and their students, is still making its way from the microscope to the water engineer's drawing board. But it is better than it was. The cholera epidemics are becoming less frequent. The water is safer than it was. The infrastructure of cleanliness. This is what is changing in 1873 and in the years surrounding it. In the Victorian period as a whole, not first the habits, not first the culture, not first the understanding of what bathing is and why it matters. First the infrastructure, the sewers under the city carrying the waste away, the water mains bringing relatively clean water to more people, the bathhouses in Southwark and Bermondsey and Whitechapel making the twopenny bath available to people who cannot bathe at home, the slow, expensive, contested, politically argued over work of building a city that can actually support the bodily needs of the people who live in it. Eleanor does not think about Basil Gett. She does not know his name, most likely. She does not know the route of the intercepting sewer that runs below the Victoria Embankment, which is being built at roughly the same time, which is one of the ways Bazalgette was very clever. Put the sewer under the embankment and use the embankment to expand the usable riverbank, and kill 2 engineering birds with 1 political stone. She does not know the pumping stations at Crossness and Abbey Mills with their magnificent Victorian Gothic machinery, the massive beam engines turning the vast flywheels that lift the sewage up and over and away. She knows that the river smells better than her mother said it used to. She knows that there was a great stink and that Parliament did something about it and that things have improved. She knows that the water from the pump tastes cleaner than the water she remembers from childhood visits to her grandmother in Bermondsey before the waterworks improved their filtration. She knows, in the body-level way that people know things about their own physical world, that the city she's living in is cleaner than the city of 10 years ago, and not as clean as she hopes the city of 10 years hence will be. She's right on both counts. The months pass. Summer comes, and with it the heat that brings its own challenges to the question of cleanliness in a city of this size, the heat that transforms the ordinary smell of the street into something more assertive, more immediate, more penetrating. The morning washes become more important in July and August, longer, more thorough. The cold water in the basin a relief as well as a necessity. The bathing frequency increases again, every 2 weeks in the heat, occasionally more often, because the heat makes the body work harder and produce more of what the body produces when it works hard, and this requires more management than the winter did. The coal fires are out and the bedroom windows are open and the slipper bath comes up without the freezing morning that winter makes of everything, and the hair dries in the warm afternoon air without the fire sitting at the window with the summer breeze moving through it. Summer bathing is its own pleasure, a different one from the April pleasure, more practical, more necessary, less lyrical, more the body simply doing what it needs to do in heat, but pleasure nonetheless. The cold water added to the tub for summer is a different quantity from winter, more of it for a cooler bath, because hot water in August is not a luxury but a suffering. The body goes into the cooler water, and the heat of the day and the heat of the corset and the heat of the wool and the heat of being alive in a city that is baking in summer smog and coal fire warmth, all of that releases into the water. The water takes it. This is what water does. This is what water has always done. Beatrice in the summer is taken to the sea. A week in Broadstairs, which has become fashionable precisely because the Victorians are discovering what the Romans already knew, which is that seawater is good for you, good specifically, demonstrably, in ways that the current science is beginning to be able to articulate, in terms of the salt and the cold, and the particular minerals in seawater that benefit the skin and the lungs and the general constitution. Beatrice paddles. You watch her from the beach, sitting in the particular posture of a Victorian lady on a beach chair, which is not relaxed in any contemporary sense of the word, but which is as relaxed as the stays and the full-day dress, and the hat required of a respectable woman in a public place permits. The sea air is different. You breathe it, and your chest expands in a way it doesn't expand in London air, or seems to expand, or something expands that felt compressed. Not the physical lungs necessarily, but something behind them. Something that has been operating at reduced capacity in the coal smoke and the closed winter rooms and the careful management of the domestic world. Something that in the sea air at Broadstairs in August briefly just opens. You breathe it in, and it smells of salt and cold water and distance, and the particular mineral honesty of the sea, which has been doing its work for 4 billion years, and requires no justification, and offers no apology, and smells entirely of itself. Beatrice comes home brown. You come home with colour in your cheeks. Your husband comes home having said nothing at all about the holiday for the entire week, and then telling his colleague the following Monday that it was excellent, that they should do it every year, that Beatrice loved the sea. You did not bathe in the sea. This is not done, or at least bathing in the sea is done in a specific way, with specific equipment, the bathing machine, the wheeled hut that is pulled into the water by a horse, so that the bather can enter the sea from the privity of its steps and not be observed by the beach. And you had access to a bathing machine, but the water was cold and the week was short, and you decided, practically, that the sea air was doing the work well enough and the bathing machine could wait for another year. But you thought about it. You stood on the beach at Broadstairs with the sea moving up the sand toward your boots, and thought about the particular surrender of going into cold water. Thought about what it would feel like, the cold hitting the chest, the salt, the resistance of it, the sea which does not accommodate itself to your temperature or your schedule or your logistics, which is simply cold and vast and indifferent and entirely itself. Maybe next year. Autumn comes again. October. The leaves on the plane trees turn gold and begin to fall, and the coal fires come back on, and the bedroom window closes. The cycle begins its repetition. Another season, another rotation through the same questions. The bath and the morning wash, and the hair and the 38 days, or the 3 weeks, or the month, or however long this particular cycle takes, shaped by the week and the weather and the social calendar and Agnes's health and the state of the copper and the event coming up that requires the proper clean, the full clean, the bath. You're 30 years old in October. Your mother sends a cake, and your mother-in-law sends a letter that is full of affectionate observations about how quickly time passes. Your husband gives you for your birthday something that you have not entirely expected. He gives you plans, architectural plans, drawn up by a builder he has consulted, for the conversion of the dressing room at the back of the bedroom into a bathroom, a proper bathroom, with a hip bath in porcelain and copper pipes run from a new tank in the loft, and a boiler in the kitchen. Not a big boiler, not a modern one, but sufficient for a household of your size, and hot water that comes from a tap over the bath rather than from jugs carried by Agnes. He hands them to you across the breakfast table and watches your face while you unfold them, with the expression of a man who is fairly confident he's done the right thing but is not entirely certain. "It'll take 3 months," he says, "and it'll be noisy, but the builders assure me—" You're not looking at him. You're looking at the plans. The dressing room, a room 12 feet by 8, which is quite small for a bathroom by later standards, but is perfectly sufficient for a bath and a washstand and a towel rail. The hip bath, which sits in the centre of the floor on a tile surround. The copper pipes. The boiler in the kitchen, which will be the main expense, which is indicated on the plans with a neat cross-hatching, and the word boiler written in careful small letters. Hot water from a tap. The specific thing this means. The thing it means for the morning wash. No more cold basin, or at least the cold basin replaced by a tap that runs warm. The thing it means for the bath. No more copper heating, no more jugs, no more Agnes carrying the weight of 6 jugs up the stairs, no more timing the copper against the social calendar, no more 38 days. The bath becomes not daily, not yet. The boiler will not support daily baths efficiently, and the house is not built for it, and the habit is not there, and it will take a generation of changed infrastructure before daily bathing becomes the default rather than the aspiration, but easier, more frequent, less logistically significant. The bath becomes a thing you do when you want to, rather than a thing you plan when you need to. You look up from the plans. Your husband is watching you with the careful attention of a man who has made a decision for his household and is waiting to learn if it was the right one. Yes, you say. Good, he says, and returns to his newspaper, and that is that. The builders come in November. The noise is significant, the dust is considerable. Agnes is displeased in the particular silent way of someone who must manage the consequences of building work without being consulted about its commencement. But by February of 1874, by the February that is 3 months after your birthday and 2 months after the builders began their work, the bathroom is done. It is small. The porcelain bath is white with a rolled edge. The tap over the bath is brass, and when you turn it clockwise, hot water comes. Hot water from a tap. You turn the tap and the water comes, and it is not perfectly hot, not the heat of the copper at its best, but it is warm, genuinely warm, warm enough, and it comes without Agnes, and without the jugs, and without the 38 days of planning. It comes because you turned the tap. You sit in the bath on a Tuesday morning in February 1874, and the water is warm and the bathroom is small, and the November builders have left a faint smell of plaster that has not yet fully cleared, and it is absolutely, completely ordinary. Just a woman in a bath on a Tuesday morning. Just warm water from a tap. This is also what history is. Not just the great stinkin' Bazalgette and Koch and Pasteur and the public health movement and the German hygienists and the articles in the ladies' magazines and the tuppenny bathhouses in Bermondsey. Also this, the specific Tuesday morning in February when the tap turns and the water comes warm and the bath is simply there, waiting for you, and you no longer need Agnes or the copper or the Thursday appointment or the 38 days. There are decades of this still to go. Decades before the hot running water reaches Mary's Court in Bermondsey. Decades before the shared basin is replaced by a bathroom in even the most modest working class home. Decades before daily bathing becomes the norm, before deodorant exists, before the medical case for daily washing is so thoroughly established that its opposite, the Victorian caution about open pores and miasma and the female constitution's vulnerability to cold, is entirely forgotten. Decades before Eleanor's granddaughter stands in a shower with the hot water hitting her shoulders and thinks nothing particular about it at all because she has never known anything else. But it starts somewhere. It starts in 1,000 different places at once. In Bazalgette's sewers and Koch's laboratory, and the bathhouse in Suffolk, and the copper in the kitchen of the house in Islington, and the architectural plans that a solicitor's wife received for her 30th birthday in October 1873, and unfolded at the breakfast table with an expression her husband found, and would later tell his daughter about when she was old enough to hear it, quite unlike anything he had seen on her face before. It starts. It is starting. In 1873 it is in the middle of starting, which is the most honest way to describe any historical change. Not that it began at a particular moment, not that it ended at a particular moment, but that in any given year of the long middle of it, it is in the process of becoming something it was not before. And Eleanor Ashworth, 30 years old, solicitor's wife, Islington, with the rose geranium soap and the 38 days and the Agnes and the violet water at the wrists and the marble-topped washstand and the slipper bath that comes up from the kitchen, and now the bathroom with the brass tap. Eleanor is part of it, not the leading edge, not the vanguard of the hygiene revolution. Just a woman living her life in the time and circumstances she has been given, managing her body with the resources available to her, doing what she can with what she has, and finding in the doing of it the particular human satisfaction of being, within her own limits, clean. Close your eyes. You're in the bathroom now, in February, in the small room with the plaster smell and the porcelain bath, and the brass tap that turns clockwise. The water is warm around you. The fire in the kitchen below is sending its heat up through the boiler and the pipes and the tap and into the water, and the water is holding you the way warm water has always held people, completely without reservation, with the simple physical generosity of water in a warm room on a cold morning. The city outside is doing its February things. The coal smoke from 10,000 chimneys, the horses on the wet streets, the plane trees bare against the grey sky, the river moving through the middle of it all cleaner than it was, not as clean as it will be, flowing the way it has flowed for 10,000 years toward the sea. Mary is at the pump, Mary's hands on the cold iron handle, pumping, filling her basin. Mary's morning, her particular managed negotiation with the water available to her. Not Eleanor's water, her own. Basil Get's sewers are under the city, doing their work in the dark, the great beam engines at Crossness turning their vast flywheels, lifting the waste of 2 million people up and away and downstream into the tide. Dr. Henderson is somewhere in the city with his cases, his doctor's bag, his growing certainty about germ theory, his careful collection of evidence for something he cannot yet fully prove. Agnes is in the kitchen, probably, with her tea and her ordinary Tuesday morning, the bathroom above her an accomplished fact that she is accepted with the pragmatic adaptability of someone who adapts to the facts of her employment, because the facts of her employment are what they are. And you are in the bath. You are warm enough. You are clean enough. You are in the warm water in the small bathroom in the Islington house on a February Tuesday in the year 1874, simply present. Your body in the warm water and the morning, and nothing particularly required of you for the next half hour except to be in it. Let the morning hold you. Let the water do its work as it has always done, as it has been doing since the first human being stood in a river and felt the water on their skin and understood, with the body's oldest knowledge, that this was good, that this was needed, that water and the body together are a kind of truth, something that cannot be reasoned out of existence by bad science or limited plumbing, or the complicated social machinery of who deserves access to what. The truth of the body in water, the oldest truth. The city goes on. The Victorian world goes on, with all its extraordinary contradictions and inequities and achievements and failures, with its magnificent infrastructure and its inadequate distribution of the benefits of that infrastructure, with its medical revolution and its persistent superstitions, with its Basil Get and its great stink, with its rose geranium and its pump water, and its 38 days and its brass tap that turns clockwise, all of it going on out there beyond the bathroom door. In here, just the water, just the warm water, just you, clean and still and held, and the city, and the river, and the centuries that follow. The bathroom that Charles gave you will be the bathroom that Beatrice grows up with, the bathroom that is simply there for her, that requires no Thursday appointment, no Agnes and the copper, no 38 days. It will be the bathroom in which Beatrice's daughter, your granddaughter, a person you will not yet know for 25 years, will have a bath every week and think it unremarkable. And her daughter after that will have a shower every morning and think that unremarkable. and somewhere in the chain of that unremarkableness, the knowledge of how it used to be, the basin and the cold water and the managed surface and the 38 days, will fade out of living memory and into history, into sleep stories, into the long, gentle dark of a November night in which someone, somewhere, is comfortable in a way that required centuries of infrastructure and argument, and dirty river water, and political will, and engineering brilliance, and medical revolution, and the quiet daily work of women managing their bodies with the resources they had. You have done that work. Eleanor and Mary and Agnes and Mrs. Hartley and all the Miss Carvers and all the other women of 1873 in their morning rituals and their cold basins and their Thursday appointments and their twopenny bathhouses, they have all done that work. Managed the body, maintained the surface, attended to what could be attended to, kept going the way bodies always keep going toward the warmth and the clean and the necessary rest. Let the water cool around you. Let the morning ease forward. Let your thoughts soften from the facts of history into something less specific, something more like the feeling of warm water and a warm room on a February morning, which is the same feeling in any year, which does not require a date or a name or a historical context. Just the feeling, just that. The water holds you. The room is warm. The city is doing what cities do, which is to keep going, to keep being itself, to contain within it every kind of human life from Eleanor's to Mary's and all the lives between and beyond them, all of them breathing the same cold smoke and living under the same grey sky and finding, each in their way, what warmth and water they can get. You're warm enough, you're clean enough, you're here, in the water, in the morning. That is enough. That is enough. Let your body settle. Let your breathing slow. The warmth of the water and the warmth of the bed are the same warmth, really. The warmth of being held. The warmth of being in a body that has been tended to, that has been given what it asked for, that can rest now. Rest. The sound of the river, always there underneath everything. The Thames moving through the city toward the sea, carrying with it the residue of the day, the warmth of the sewers, the salt of the tide, the long grey memory of all the November mornings and all the Thursday appointments and all the basins of cold water and all the rose geranium soap and all the 100 strokes of the hairbrush. All of it moving downstream in the dark. The city quiets. The morning quiets. You are warm. You are clean. You are in the small bathroom with the brass tap. Or you're in the bed in the Islington house. Or you're somewhere else entirely. Somewhere comfortable. Somewhere warm. Somewhere that holds you the way warm water holds you. Completely, without reservation. Let it hold you. Let sleep come. The same way it came for Eleanor in her bed on a February night in 1874, clean and warm in her clean sheets, the bathroom door closed on the damp smell of the bath she had that morning, the rose geranium faint on the pillow, the same way it came for Agnes in the attic room above, the same way it came for Mary in the room off Tooley Street, the court outside quiet, the pump still, the morning still hours away, all of them sleeping, all of them warm enough and clean enough and safe enough for this particular night. And you, warm enough, clean enough, safe enough, and the river, always the river, moving in the dark. Good night.